Aries stopped walking, and that was the only warning Declan Reeves got. No sound from the cafeteria, no shouting in the corridor, just a German shepherd planting 4 paws on a linoleum floor and turning his body toward a set of double doors with the specific, locked certainty of an animal that had already made a determination and was waiting for his partner to catch up. Declan looked through the rectangular window in the door. A small girl sat completely still at the far corner table, while a group of older kids emptied a tray of cafeteria scraps directly onto her head. She did not move. She did not make a sound. She just sat there and took it. Drop your city in the comments right now. I want to see how far this story travels. Subscribe, hit the bell, stay with me to the end, because what Aries saw through that window, and what Declan did about it, does not end in that cafeteria. Not even close. Declan had been 30 seconds from the exit. That was the part he kept coming back to in the days that followed. 30 seconds. He had signed in at the front office, dropped the donation box at the designated table in the main corridor for Veterans Appreciation Week, exchanged a quick wave with his sister Angela through the window of her 3rd grade classroom, and was heading back toward the parking lot when Aries stopped walking. He had been working with Aries for 2 years, and he had learned to read the dog's stillness the way you learn to read any language you live inside long enough. There was the stillness of a dog resting, the stillness of a dog tracking something in the general environment. And then there was the stillness that Aries was exhibiting right now, which had no casual quality in it whatsoever. Every muscle engaged, body turned 20 degrees left, eyes locked on the cafeteria doors. The low, continuous vocalization that did not carry aggression, did not carry alarm, but carried the single, insistent communication that Declan had learned to treat as the most reliable data point in any situation. Something in there requires your attention. Declan set the donation box down on the floor. He crossed to the cafeteria doors and looked through the rectangular window. The girl was at the far corner table, 8 years old, maybe 9. Dark braids, a faded shirt with a last name stenciled across the back in the blocky print of a deployment souvenir. She was sitting with her hands flat on the table in front of a small dinosaur lunchbox, and she was holding herself with the specific, terrible stillness of a child who understood that movement attracted attention, and that stillness was the closest she could get to not being there at all. A boy 2 years older stood beside her table, with 3 others. He was holding a cafeteria tray loaded with what looked like the collected leavings of 4 different lunches. Cold tomato sauce, the wet remains of pasta, a half-finished cup of fruit in syrup. He was narrating something to his group. They were laughing. The tray tilted. The contents came down across the girl's hair, her face, the front of her shirt, the dinosaur lunchbox. Cold and heavy and deliberate. She did not flinch. She did not cry out. She sat in exactly the same position she had been sitting in before, as if she had known it was coming and had made a decision about how she was going to receive it. 2 teachers were at the far wall. One was looking at her phone. The other was watching. And the watching had the quality of someone calculating how long they needed to wait before it was acceptable to walk away. Declan pushed the cafeteria door open. He did not run. He did not raise his voice. He walked in the way he walked into every room that required something from him, with the unhurried, deliberate pace of a man who understood that how you entered a space determined everything that happened once you were inside it. NWU. Type 3. Digital camouflage. Green and brown. Worn and real. 30 years old. Short, dark brown hair. The kind of face that does not perform its intentions. Aries walked beside him. The cafeteria did what cafeterias do when something interrupts the established order. It rippled. The noise level dropped in a wave that moved outward from the door as heads turned, registered the uniform, registered the dog, and recalibrated. By the time Declan was halfway across the room, the table nearest to the girl's corner had gone completely quiet. The boy with the now empty tray saw him coming. His name was Nash Holbrook, and he had been running this corner of the cafeteria for 2 years, on the established understanding that the established order ran in his direction. He stood his ground for approximately 4 seconds, which was long enough for him to realize the man walking toward him was not a teacher and was not going to stop at a reasonable conversational distance. He took 1 step back. Declan did not look at Nash. He walked to the girl's table and crouched down until his eyes were at her level. Aries moved to her left side and sat, pressing his warm flank gently against her arm. The girl looked at the dog. Children look at dogs with the honest, unguarded face they stop showing the world around age 10. She looked at Aries with the expression of someone who has been braced against impact for a long time and has just felt something land that did not hurt. "Hey," Declan said quietly. She looked at him. Her eyes were steady and dark and considerably older than her face. "I'm Declan. This is Aries." He paused. "What's your name?" She hesitated for exactly 1 second. "Lily." "Lily." He said it the way you say a name when you want the person to hear that you have received it and intend to keep it. He looked at the shirt, at the stenciled last name, Carver, then at the thin chain visible at the collar, the small metal rectangles hanging from it. He looked back at her face. "Are those your dad's?" he asked. She reached up and touched the dog tags with 2 fingers. The motion was automatic, private, the gesture of a child who had been making it for long enough that she no longer knew she was doing it. She nodded. "What's his name?" "Owen," she said. "Staff Sergeant Owen Carver." She said the rank. 8 years old, and she said the rank without prompting, with the specific, proud precision of a child who had been taught what it meant and understood what it cost. Something moved through Declan's chest that he did not put a name to. He stood up slowly. He turned around. Nash Holbrook was still standing 3 feet from the table with his empty tray, and the group of kids who had been laughing, now arranged in a semicircle behind him. All of them very still, all of them recalculating. Declan looked at Nash for a long moment. Nash's chin came up. The instinctive posture of a child who has been taught by the adults around him that confidence is armor, and that armor is worn forward. "Did you do this?" Declan asked. Nash said nothing. "That's a yes," Declan said. His voice had not changed. It was still level, still even. Still the temperature of a man who was not angry because anger was not the tool this situation needed. "Did someone tell you whose shirt that is?" Nash looked at the stenciling on Lily's back. His expression did not change, but something behind his eyes shifted. He had not looked at the shirt before. He had not needed to. The shirt had not been relevant to what he was doing. "Her dad is deployed," one of Nash's group said. The tone was informational rather than defensive, the contribution of a child trying to be helpful in a situation that had stopped being comfortable. "Her dad is not deployed," Declan said. He said it simply, just the fact. "Her dad was killed in action 14 months ago." The cafeteria was completely quiet now. Not the managed quiet of a room where authority has told everyone to stop. The organic quiet of a room where everyone has simultaneously received information that changed the meaning of the last 5 minutes. Nash stood with the empty tray in his hands and his chin still forward and his eyes doing the rapid, complicated work of a child whose armor has just been removed by a single sentence and who does not yet know what to do with the air against his skin. Behind Declan, Lily had her hand resting on Aries' back. She was not looking at Nash. She was looking at the dog. She had the expression of a child who has learned to receive bad outcomes without reacting, because reacting gave the people delivering the bad outcome something they wanted. And she had made a decision somewhere in the last 14 months that she was not going to do that anymore. Aries pressed harder against her arm. She leaned into it. Declan turned back to her. He looked at the sauce on her hair, on her shirt, on the dinosaur lunchbox that her father had bought the week before he deployed. He reached into the cargo pocket of his NWU pants and pulled out a small packet of napkins, the kind that military personnel carry from habit and always have, and set them on the table beside her without comment. Then he took his phone out. Not to make a call. Not yet. He opened the camera. He turned back toward the cafeteria and photographed the table from exactly where he was standing. The sauce on the floor. The empty tray in Nash's hands. The group still arranged behind him. He took 4 photographs in 10 seconds, then put the phone back in his pocket. Nash watched the phone go back into the pocket. "You can't just take pictures of kids," Nash said. The confidence in his voice had been replaced by something that was trying to sound like confidence, and was not. "I was standing in the corridor before I came in," Declan said. "I have video from there too." Nash's group exchanged glances. The teacher who had been watching from the far wall was moving now. She had been watching since Declan walked in and had been running the institutional arithmetic of whether to intervene and in which direction. She had arrived at a direction. She came toward the table with the expression of a woman implementing a response protocol. "Everything okay here?" she said. The question was directed at Declan, not at Lily. Declan looked at her steadily. "Is this a routine occurrence?" The teacher blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Lily, at this table." "Has this happened before?" A pause that lasted 1 second too long. "There have been some social integration challenges," the teacher said, using the specific, layered language of someone who has been trained to frame difficult information in ways that protect the institution rather than describe the situation. Declan looked at her with the same even attention he had been giving everyone in this room. "That's not what I asked." The cafeteria doors opened behind him. Principal Donna Garfield came in at the quick, managed pace of a woman who had been alerted and was arriving to take control of a situation before it defined itself without her. She was mid-50s, efficient, dressed with the specific precision of someone for whom appearance was professional infrastructure. She swept the room in 2 seconds, located the relevant parties, and moved toward Declan with her hand extended and her face arranged into the expression of a concerned administrator. "Chief Petty Officer," she said, reading his rank from the insignia on his uniform. "I'm Principal Garfield. I understand there's been an incident?" "There has," Declan said. He did not take her hand immediately. He looked at Lily first. "Are you okay?" Lily looked up at him. She had been waiting for a long time, Declan understood in that moment, for someone to ask her that question and mean it. She had been waiting for someone to ask it, and then wait for the actual answer instead of moving on before she could give it. She touched the dog tags. "I'm okay," she said. The way she said it had nothing uncertain in it. The specific, steady okay of a child who had decided a long time ago that she was going to be. Declan looked at Principal Garfield. He took her hand. "We should talk," he said. Behind him, Aries stayed beside Lily. His amber eyes tracked the room with the patient, unblinking attention of an animal that had found what it stopped for and was not going to move until the finding was finished. He had been working since the moment they walked through the door. He was nowhere near done. Principal Garfield's office smelled like artificial lavender and managed decisions. Declan sat across from her desk with Aries at his left heel and Lily 2 chairs down, still in her sauce-stained shirt because no one had thought to offer her anything else, and Declan had not wanted to separate her from the room where the conversation was going to happen. Garfield had suggested twice that Lily wait outside with the school counselor. Declan had declined both times without explanation, which was its own kind of explanation. Garfield folded her hands on the desk. I want to start by saying that what happened in the cafeteria today is absolutely unacceptable, she said. Her voice had the warm, practiced weight of someone who had delivered that sentence before and understood which emotional register it needed to land in. We take incidents of this nature extremely seriously. How many incidents of this nature have there been? Declan asked. Garfield's hands moved slightly, a micro-adjustment. There have been some documented social conflicts involving Lily over the course of the year. How many? A pause. I'd need to pull the file to give you an exact number. Pull it. The pause that followed was 2 seconds longer than a pause should be when the answer is simply a matter of opening a drawer. Garfield reached for her keyboard, typed something, looked at the screen. There have been 4 documented incidents, she said. Since when? Since October of last year. Declan looked at Lily. Lily was looking at Aries. Her hand was resting on his back, and she was doing the thing she did, holding herself still and absorbing everything without appearing to absorb anything. October, Declan said. What happened in September last year? Garfield looked at the screen, then at Declan, then back at the screen as if the screen might offer a version of the answer that required less from her. Her father's death was reported to the school in late September, she said. So 4 documented incidents in 8 months, Declan said, starting 1 month after she lost her father. He let that sit for exactly the time it needed to sit. And today makes 5. Garfield straightened slightly. I understand how this looks, Chief Petty Officer, and I want to assure you that each of those incidents was handled through our standard conflict resolution process. Walk me through what that process produced. Another pause. This one had a different quality. Not the pause of someone gathering information, the pause of someone deciding how much of the information they were going to give. Each incident resulted in a mediated conversation between the students involved and a note placed in both files. Nash Holbrook's file has 4 notes in it. Correct. And what was the consequence attached to those notes? Garfield's hands moved again on the desk. Consequences are determined on a case-by-case basis, and in each instance, we assess the situation and determine that a restorative rather than punitive approach was in Lily's best interest. Declan looked at her. Did you ask Lily what was in her best interest? Lily's hand had stopped moving on Aries' back. She was listening. She had been listening the whole time, and they both knew it. And only one of them in this room had been behaving accordingly. The door opened. Gerald Holbrook did not knock. He was 52 years old. Expensive, in the specific way of a man who had learned that the appearance of money was itself a form of leverage. And he walked into Garfield's office with the momentum of someone who had walked into rooms like this before and had never needed to slow down. He looked at Declan. He looked at the uniform. He did the rapid recalculation that people like Gerald Holbrook did when the room contained a variable they had not been briefed on. He chose to proceed as if the variable was manageable. Principal Garfield. He did not look at Lily. I came as soon as I heard. Where's Nash? Nash is with the assistant principal, Garfield said. Good. He turned to Declan and extended his hand with the smooth authority of a man who led with handshakes because handshakes established a social contract that he then got to define the terms of. Gerald Holbrook. Nash is my son. I appreciate your concern here, but I want to make sure we're all working from the same understanding of what actually happened today. Declan shook his hand. What's your understanding? Holbrook spread his hands slightly. Kids being kids. A cafeteria situation that got out of hand. Nash is a good boy. He comes from a good family. And I think what we all want is for this to be resolved quickly and appropriately, so everyone can move forward. Appropriately, Declan said. That's right. 4 prior incidents, Declan said, all involving your son and this child, all resolved without consequence to Nash. And today he emptied a tray of food onto an 8-year-old girl whose father was killed in action 14 months ago. He paused. Walk me through which part of that is kids being kids. Holbrook's expression shifted. Not much. The practiced, minimal shift of a man recalibrating his approach without abandoning his position. I understand the emotional weight you're attaching to this, he said, and I respect your service, truly. But we don't know the full context of today's incident, and I think it would be premature to characterize my son's behavior based on incomplete information. I have video, Declan said. The room went quiet. Holbrook looked at Garfield. Garfield looked at the desk. It was a look that lasted less than 2 seconds and carried more information than a conversation. Declan saw it. You said the cafeteria security footage from the prior incidents was reviewed during the resolution process, Declan said to Garfield. That's standard procedure, Garfield said carefully. Do you still have that footage? A pause. Footage is retained for 60 days per district policy. So the footage from all 4 incidents should still be in the system. Garfield's hands moved again. Holbrook said, I don't think a cafeteria camera is going to tell us anything that a proper conversation among the adults in this room can't resolve more efficiently. More efficiently for who? Declan asked. Holbrook looked at him with the expression of a man who had just decided he was done performing patience. Let me be direct, Holbrook said. I sit on the school board. I have been a significant contributor to this school's programs and facilities for 4 years. I am not an adversary here. But I am also not going to sit in this office while a man I've never met characterizes my son as a predator because of a cafeteria incident, regardless of what uniform he's wearing. The uniform comment was deliberate. Declan recognized it because he had heard it before in different forms. The specific move of using respect as a conditional, implying that the uniform deserved deference, and therefore the man wearing it should accept deference in return. It was a clean maneuver, and it usually worked, because most people in uniform had been trained to receive it gracefully. Declan was not most people in uniform. The uniform is just what I was wearing when I walked in, Declan said. What I saw through that window is what I saw. The door opened again. Angela Reeves came in without knocking. She was 28, smaller than Declan, wearing the lanyard and tired eyes of a third-grade teacher 2 hours from the end of a school day. She looked at the room and did what younger sisters do when they walk into a situation their older brother is already in the middle of. She read it in 4 seconds flat. Then she looked at Lily. Lily looked at Angela with the expression of a child encountering a familiar face in an unfamiliar situation. The specific, relieved recognition of someone who has been in a room of adults for too long and has just seen someone arrive who actually sees them. Hey, Lily, Angela said, gentle and direct. Can I sit with you? Lily nodded. Angela sat beside her. She looked at Aries. Aries looked back at her with the calm, assessing amber gaze that he offered to people Declan trusted. His tail moved once. Angela looked at her brother. She said nothing out loud, but her eyes said something that moved across the room between them with the efficiency of people who had been communicating this way since childhood. It said, I need to tell you something, and it cannot wait. Excuse me a moment, Declan said to Garfield. He stood and stepped into the hallway, pulling the office door mostly closed behind him. Angela came out 30 seconds later, closing it the rest of the way. She kept her voice low. This is not new, she said. I have been watching this happen all year. Every time something gets reported, it disappears into the resolution process, and nothing changes. I have filed 2 internal concerns through the proper channels, and both times I was told it was being handled." She paused. "Holbrook has been on the school board since before Garfield became principal. He supported her appointment. Everybody in this building knows it, and nobody says it out loud." Declan looked at the closed door. "4 incidents," he said. "That were documented," Angela said. "I can think of at least 3 more that Lily never reported, because she had already learned what reporting produced." The weight of that sentence settled. He thought about Lily sitting at the corner table, the table nobody fought over. The specific, deliberate choice of a child who had mapped the cafeteria for the path of least resistance and taken it every day, and still ended up with sauce on her hair. "Who's Victor Okafor?" Declan asked. Angela blinked. "You know Vic?" "His name came up in a Gold Star family briefing 6 months ago. He runs community liaison for this district. He's been trying to get a formal review of how this school handles Gold Star family students for the entire year," Angela said. "Garfield has declined every scheduling request." Declan took out his phone. "Go back in," he said. "Stay with Lily." Angela looked at him the way she had been looking at him since they were children, with the specific, calibrated trust of someone who had watched him make decisions under pressure before and had learned that the decisions were worth trusting. She went back in. Declan dialed. The phone rang twice. "Okafor," said the voice on the other end. "Vic, it's Declan Reeves. I'm at Maplewood Elementary. I need you to hear something." He told it in 3 minutes. Flat, factual, sequential. Okafor listened the same way Reyes always listened, without interrupting, without asking questions that the person giving the report would have answered if they had more time. When Declan finished, Okafor was quiet for 4 seconds. "What's the girl's last name?" he said. "Carver," Declan said. "Owen Carver's daughter." A pause that meant something. "I knew Owen," Okafor said quietly. Declan closed his eyes for 1 second. "How long can you keep them in that office?" Okafor asked. "As long as I need to." "Give me 20 minutes." The call ended. Declan stood in the hallway for a moment with the phone in his hand and the closed office door in front of him, behind which Gerald Holbrook was sitting with his board membership and his donor wall credit and his 4 years of managed resolutions, and a small girl was sitting with her hand on a dog's back and her father's dog tags around her neck, and the quiet, steady patience of someone who had been waiting for a long time for something to be different. 20 minutes. He put the phone in his pocket and opened the door. Holbrook looked up. "Sorry for the interruption," Declan said. He sat back down. He looked at Garfield. "You were going to pull those incident files." Garfield looked at Holbrook. Holbrook's jaw shifted. Aries turned his head toward the door. His ears moved forward in the slow, tracking adjustment of an animal who had registered something approaching from outside the building and was filing it under incoming. Declan kept his eyes on Garfield. "The files," he said again. Garfield pulled the files. She did it slowly, with the particular reluctance of someone opening a door they had been keeping closed for a reason. And she set the printed incident reports on the desk in a stack that was thinner than it should have been for 5 separate events involving the same 2 children over 8 months. Declan picked them up without asking permission. He read them in silence. The reports were written in the specific institutional language of a system that had learned to document events without describing them. Words like altercation and social conflict and peer interaction difficulty appeared where words like targeted and repeated and escalating should have been. Each report ended with a resolution summary. Each resolution summary contained the phrase, "Restorative conversation completed and return to class." Each one had a signature line at the bottom. Garfield's signature on all 5. Nash Holbrook's name in the incident description of all 5. Lily's name listed as the affected student on all 5. There was not a single document in the stack that contained a consequence for Nash Holbrook. Not one. Declan set the stack down on the desk and looked at Garfield. She held his gaze for approximately 2 seconds and then looked at her keyboard. "These restorative conversations," Declan said. "Who facilitated them?" "Our school counselor." "Did Lily's mother attend any of them?" Garfield's hands moved on the desk. "We made contact with the family." "That's not what I asked." There were some scheduling challenges given Ms. Carver's work commitments. "She works 2 jobs," Angela said from beside Lily. She said it quietly, without accusation, just the flat fact of it. "She works a hospital shift and an evening shift. She has been asking for meeting times that don't require her to lose wages, and has been told the counselor is only available during school hours." Garfield looked at Angela with the expression of a supervisor encountering a subordinate who has just said something outside the scope of what supervisors expect subordinates to say in these rooms. Angela looked back at her without flinching. She had been waiting to say it for a long time, and the waiting had made it clean. Holbrook leaned forward. "I want to be clear about something," he said. His voice had shed the earlier warmth entirely. He was in a different register now, the register of a man who had decided the room had gone far enough in an inconvenient direction and was applying the correction. "These files represent this school's good faith effort to address a series of minor incidents through appropriate channels. What I'm hearing in this room right now sounds a lot like an attempt to reframe a normal school discipline situation as something more serious. And I have to say, frankly, that concerns me." "It concerns you," Declan said. "It does, because I think there are people in this conversation who have an emotional investment in a particular narrative, and I think that emotional investment is driving us toward conclusions that the facts don't support." Declan looked at him for a long moment. "Let me ask you something, Gerald." Holbrook's eyes narrowed slightly at the first name. Declan had been calling him Mr. Holbrook since the man walked in. The shift was deliberate, and they both knew it. "If I handed you these 5 reports," Declan said, "and I removed every name from them, covered up Nash, covered up Lily, covered up this school, covered up every identifying detail, and I asked you to read them and tell me whether the child in the role of the aggressor had experienced any meaningful consequence for 5 months of documented behavior toward the same target." He paused. "What would you tell me?" Holbrook said nothing. "Take your time," Declan said. The room was very quiet. Lily had not looked up from Aries since Holbrook started talking. She was sitting with her shoulder pressed against Angela and her hand moving in the slow, steady rhythm on the dog's coat. And she was listening to every word with the specific, contained attention of a child who had been in rooms like this before and knew that the adults in them were arguing about her life without asking her about it. Aries turned his head and looked at the door. A knock. Firm. Unhurried. Garfield frowned. "I didn't ask for—" The door opened. Victor Okafor walked in wearing his retired dress uniform and carrying a manila folder that he had assembled in a moving vehicle in under 20 minutes, which told Declan everything he needed to know about how long Okafor had been waiting for an occasion to assemble it. He was 61 years old, broad through the chest, with close-cut gray hair and the unhurried, measured movement of a man who had spent 30 years making his presence felt by how little he needed to perform it. He looked at the room with a comprehensive, unhurried scan of someone taking an operational inventory. He nodded at Declan, looked at Lily, held the look for a moment, then turned to Garfield. "Principal Garfield," he said, "I'm Sergeant Major Victor Okafor, retired, I'm the district liaison for Gold Star families. I've been trying to get a meeting with your office since February." He set the folder on the desk beside the incident reports. "That's correspondence from my office to yours. 6 meeting requests over 8 months, 6 non-responses." Garfield looked at the folder, then at Holbrook. The look lasted half a second. Okafor clocked it the same way Declan had clocked the earlier one. "There's also a letter in there from the district superintendent's office," Okafor said, "requesting a formal administrative review of incident documentation at this school going back 18 months. He paused. "I made a call from my car on the way here. The superintendent's office took 13 minutes to respond. They are aware of what this review will find." Holbrook stood up. "This is completely inappropriate," he said. "You cannot walk into a school building and drop documents on a principal's desk based on one afternoon's events and a phone call you made 20 minutes ago." "The documents were prepared over several months," Okafor said. "I just finally have a reason to deliver them." He looked at Holbrook with the steady, unimpressed patience of a man who had dealt with Gerald Holbrooks in various forms across 30 years of service and had developed a specific tolerance for the species. "And you are?" "Gerald Holbrook. I sit on the school board." "I know who you are," Okafor said. "Your name appears in the correspondence file. There were 3 occasions in the past year where meeting requests from my office were forwarded to the school board for review rather than answered directly. That is not standard procedure." Holbrook's face had gone to a specific shade that Declan recognized as the color of a man watching a narrative he built over years begin to unravel in a single afternoon. "I want legal representation present before this conversation continues," Holbrook said. "You're not being charged with anything," Declan said. "This is a conversation about a little girl's school records." "I know what this is," Holbrook said. "Do you?" Declan looked at him. "Because from where I'm sitting, what this is 5 incident reports that document your son targeting the same child repeatedly for 8 months, all resolved without consequence, in a school where you have board membership and donor standing and the principal's professional history. That's what this is." He picked up the incident reports and set them beside Okafor's folder. "That's just the paper version of it." The room held the specific, pressurized quiet of a situation that has reached the point where the next sentence is going to define the direction of everything that follows it. Lily spoke. She did not raise her hand. She did not ask permission. She looked up from Aries and looked at the room with the clear, steady gaze of a child who had been listening long enough and who had arrived at the determination that the people in this room were talking around the thing they should be talking about. "He does it because my dad isn't here," she said. Nobody spoke. "He started after my dad died," she said. "The first time was at recess, 3 weeks after school started. He said my dad was dead because he wasn't smart enough to stay safe." She said it without drama, without tears, with the flat, matter-of-fact delivery of a child who had processed a wound so many times it had become information. "I didn't tell my mom because she was already crying every night, and I didn't want to make it worse." Angela's hand came down over Lily's. Declan looked at the wall for exactly 2 seconds. He needed 2 seconds, and he took them without apology. Then he looked at Holbrook. Holbrook was looking at Lily. The board member posture was gone. The donor wall confidence was gone. What was left underneath both of those was something smaller and considerably less rehearsed. He was looking at an 8-year-old girl who had just described what his son had done to her as if it were weather, as if it were simply the climate she had been living inside for 8 months. And the look on his face said that whatever calculation he had been running when he walked through that door had just encountered a variable it had not modeled for. He sat down slowly. Garfield was very still. Okafor was looking at Lily with the expression of a man who had spent 20 years working with Gold Star families and who still, after all of it, could be stopped by a child describing what loss costs in the language that only children who have paid it fully understand. "Lily," Declan said. His voice was even and quiet. "I want you to know something." She looked at him. "What your dad did, putting on that uniform and going where they sent him, that took more courage than most people ever have to find. And the way you've been handling this year, coming to school every day and sitting at your table and keeping your head up." He paused. "That's the same kind of courage. He would know it if he saw it." Lily touched the dog tags. Her eyes were bright, but they did not spill. "He used to say that," she said quietly. "That brave isn't not being scared. It's being scared and going anyway." "He was right," Declan said. Aries pressed his forehead against her arm. The cafeteria door from the hallway opened, and the assistant principal stepped in, with Nash Holbrook beside him. Nash had been brought to join the meeting at Garfield's earlier instruction, and was arriving into a room that was nothing like the room he had been brought to before. The rooms where things were talked about and smoothed over, and he walked out the same direction he walked in. He stopped just inside the door. He looked at his father. His father was sitting with his hands on his knees and his donor wall confidence somewhere on the floor. Nash looked at Lily. He looked at the dog tags on the chain visible at her collar. He looked at the sauce still dried on the front of her shirt. He had been building something on his face since he walked in. The assembled armor of a child who had learned that these rooms ended in his favor, and was preparing to inhabit that outcome. The armor did not hold. It fell apart on the inside, where nobody could see it fall, except anyone in the room who was looking carefully enough. Declan was looking carefully enough. Okafor opened his folder and removed a single page. He set it on the desk in front of Garfield. "The district review begins Thursday," he said. 18 months of incident documentation, resolution records, and communication logs. If the pattern that appears in these 5 reports is systemic, it will be visible across the full record. He looked at Garfield. "You will be given the opportunity to respond." Garfield looked at the page. She looked at Holbrook. This time the look was longer, and what it contained was the specific, devastating realization of a woman who had spent 4 years managing a relationship she thought was an asset, discovering that the asset had become a liability faster than she had any time to manage. Holbrook stood up. He straightened his jacket. He looked at Nash. He looked at Lily one more time. When he spoke, his voice had shed everything it had come in with. "Nash," he said, "I need you to look at me." Nash looked at his father. "Do you understand what you did?" Nash looked at the floor. "Look at me," Holbrook said. Nash looked up. "Do you understand what you did to this girl?" A long silence. "Yes," Nash said. The word was small, and it was real, and it cost him something to produce it. Holbrook nodded once. He did not look at Declan. He did not look at Okafor or Garfield. He picked up his jacket from the chair and walked to the door, and he put his hand on his son's shoulder as he passed. And the gesture was not for the room. It was private. The specific, complicated touch of a father who had just watched his child become visible to him in a way that was not comfortable and was not going away. They left. Garfield sat very still. The room had the quality that rooms have after the thing that needed to happen finally happens. Declan looked at Lily. Lily was looking at the door that Nash had just walked out of. Her expression was not triumph. It was not relief. It was something more complicated and more honest than either of those. The expression of a child processing the experience of being seen and defended after a long time of being neither. Aries put his chin on her knee. She looked down at him. "Is he always like this?" she asked. Pretty much, Declan said. He's really good at it, she said. I know, Declan said. He's been doing it his whole life. His phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. A number he did not recognize with a Virginia area code and a text that read, "Call me. Jag. Okafor sent your contact." He looked at Okafor. Okafor looked at the ceiling with the expression of a man who had made one more call from his car than he had mentioned. Declan almost smiled. He stepped into the hallway and made the call. The voice in the other end was a retired JAG officer named Marsh, who had been waiting to hear the specific combination of facts that Declan had just delivered, and who, when the delivery was complete, was quiet for exactly 4 seconds before he said the sentence that Declan had been building toward since Aries stopped walking in the corridor an hour ago. I've been looking at the Gold Star family education equity cases in this district for 2 years, Marsh said. I just needed someone with standing to walk through that door. There's a little girl here, Declan said. 8 years old. Her father was Owen Carver. A pause. I know Owen's name, Marsh said quietly. Then you know why this matters. I already knew why it mattered, Marsh said. Now I have what I need to do something about it. Declan put the phone in his pocket. He stood in the hallway for a moment. Through the closed office door, he could hear Angela's voice, low and warm, and Lily's voice responding, and underneath both of them, the particular silence of Aries, doing the work that nobody assigned him and nobody needed to. He had been 30 seconds from the exit. He thought about that. He did not regret staying. He had never, in any situation in his life, regretted listening to his dog. He opened the door and went back in. There was still work to do. Carrie Carver arrived at 3:17. Declan knew it was her before the office door opened, because Aries turned his head toward the hallway 30 seconds before the knock, and because Angela had texted the school's main number when Okafor arrived, and the message had worked its way through to the hospital where Carrie was finishing a shift. She came in still wearing her scrubs, a light blue that had the specific worn quality of fabric that had been washed too many times in institutional machines. Her shoes were the rubber-soled kind that nurses wore for 12-hour shifts, and she had not stopped to change anything because she had not stopped at all. She came through the door and found the room and then found her daughter, and the 4 seconds between those two things were the 4 seconds of a woman running the worst calculation a parent runs, the one where you measure what you were seeing against what you feared you would see, and arriving at a number that was better than the worst, but was still not nothing. Lily. She crossed to her daughter and crouched and put both hands on Lily's face and looked at her with the focused, rapid assessment of a nurse and a mother running simultaneously. The dried sauce on the shirt, the dog tags untouched at the collar, Lily's eyes clear and steady. I'm okay, Mom, Lily said. Carrie looked at her for one more second. Then she stood and turned to the room. She took it in the way people take in rooms when they have walked into situations without briefing. The incident reports on the desk. Okafor in his dress uniform. Declan in his NWU. Garfield sitting with the stillness of someone who had run out of management strategies. Angela in the corner with her hands still near Lily's shoulder. Her eyes stopped on Declan. She read the uniform. She looked at Aries. She looked at the dog tags on her daughter's chest, and then back at Declan. And she did the math that any Gold Star family member does when they encounter a service member in an unexpected context. She did not speak for a moment. Who are you? She asked. Declan Reeves, Chief Petty Officer, Naval Special Warfare. I came to drop off a donation for Veterans Week, and my dog stopped at the cafeteria door. He paused. I'm glad he did. Carrie looked at Aries. Aries looked back at her with the amber, patient attention he offered to people he had decided were worth holding steady for. He found it, Lily said from her chair. He knew something was wrong before Declan even looked. Carrie's jaw moved. She pressed her lips together for exactly the time she needed to press them together. Then she straightened and turned to Garfield. "Show me the file," she said. Garfield pushed the incident reports across the desk. Carrie picked them up. She read standing. She read the way people read documents when they have been waiting for information, and the information is both worse than they hoped and exactly what they suspected. Her hands did not shake. Her face did not collapse. She read all 5 reports, one after another, methodically, and when she finished, she set them down and looked at the date on the first one. October 14th. 3 weeks after we buried him, she said. It was not addressed to anyone in the room. It was the specific, private accounting of a woman placing a fact in the timeline of her life and registering what it meant about the 8 months that had followed. She looked at Garfield. "Did anyone at this school call me after the first incident?" she said. Garfield began the sentence about scheduling challenges. Carrie stopped her with a single look. Not angry. Worse than angry. The look of a woman who had been working 2 jobs and raising a daughter alone, and managing grief that had no schedule and no days off, and who had just read 5 documents that told her the institution responsible for her daughter's safety had been actively inconveniencing itself to avoid doing anything about it. "I work from 5 in the morning until 10 at night," Carrie said. "I have been doing that since Owen died because his survivor benefits cover the rent and not much else. I asked twice for a meeting time that did not require me to lose wages and was told the counselor was unavailable." She paused. "I assumed the school was handling it. I assumed that was what schools did." Garfield looked at the desk. "Lily never told me how bad it was," Carrie continued, "because she is 8 years old, and she knew I was already drowning, and she was trying to protect me." She looked at her daughter. Lily looked back at her with the expression of a child who had just had something private made visible, and was not sure whether to feel relieved or guilty. Carrie's eyes went bright for a moment. She did not let them spill. "She has been protecting me for 8 months, when it was supposed to be the other way around." Declan said nothing. There was nothing to say that would improve on the truth of the sentence. Okafor stepped forward. "Miss Carver," he said. His voice had the specific, grounded warmth of a man who had delivered hard information to Gold Star families many times, and had learned that what those families needed was not softening. They needed honesty, and they needed someone to stand beside it with them. "I'm Victor Okafor. I served with your husband's battalion in 2009. I didn't know Owen well, but I knew him enough to know the kind of man he was." He paused. "I've been trying to get a formal review of how this school handles families like yours for 8 months. Today is the first day I've had standing to make it happen." Carrie looked at him. Something shifted in her face at the mention of 2009. The specific, involuntary recognition of a Gold Star spouse encountering someone who had been in the physical world that her husband occupied, who had breathed the same air and stood on the same ground. "Thank you," she said quietly. "The review starts Thursday," Okafor said. "The district superintendent is aware. The incident records will be examined in full. The resolution process that produced 5 incidents with 0 consequences will be the specific subject of the review." He paused. "There is also a JAG attorney who has been building a Gold Star education equity case in this district, and who spoke with Declan an hour ago. His name is Marsh. He would like to speak with you, if you're willing." Carrie absorbed that. "What does that mean for Lily?" she asked. "Not for the district, not for the review. For Lily. What does she walk into tomorrow morning?" It was the right question, and it was the only question that mattered, and Declan had been waiting for someone to ask it in exactly those terms. "That depends on what we decide in this room," Declan said. He looked at Garfield. Garfield understood that she was being given an opportunity to make a decision that would define what came after this afternoon. She had spent the last 90 minutes watching the architecture of managed resolution collapse in real time, and she was now sitting in the rubble of it, with a district review on Thursday, and a JAG attorney's name in the conversation, and a Gold Star mother across the desk from her, who was waiting for an answer. She straightened in her chair. "Effective immediately," Garfield said. "Nash Holbrook will be removed from shared spaces with Lily during the school day, pending the outcome of a full behavioral review." She paused. "I will also be scheduling a formal meeting with Ms. Carver at a time and location that works for her schedule, not for mine." It was not enough. Everyone in the room knew it was not enough. But it was the first sentence that Garfield had said all afternoon that was not dressed in resolution language and image management. And the fact of that was its own small, significant thing. "There's something else," Angela said. Everyone looked at her. Angela had been in the corner through most of the afternoon, present and quiet. The specific presence of someone who understood that the room needed what it needed, and that her role was to hold Lily steady while it happened. But she had been thinking, and she had arrived at something, and she looked at her brother when she said it. "Nash," she said. "What happens to Nash?" Declan looked at her. "He's 11 years old," Angela said. "His father is about to go through a conflict of interest review that is going to reshape his entire understanding of his own family. He did something that caused real harm. He needs to understand what that harm was." She looked at Okafor. "Does your Veterans Liaison program have anything for students?" Okafor was quiet for a moment. "We have a cemetery maintenance program," he said slowly. "Community service with the Veterans Memorial Garden. Adults, mostly. But I've had students participate when a judge has ordered educational service in lieu of suspension." "Could Nash participate voluntarily?" Angela asked. Okafor looked at Declan. Declan thought about Nash in the doorway, the armor falling apart on the inside. The single word, yes, that had cost him something. "If he shows up," Declan said. "Every week, with his hands in the dirt and his eyes on the names on those plaques." He paused. "Not because a judge told him to. Because his father brings him and stands there and makes sure he understands what he is looking at." Okafor nodded slowly. "He can." Carrie had been listening to this exchange. She looked at Declan. "You're asking him to learn something instead of just be punished," she said. "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. "Owen would have said the same thing," she said. The room held that sentence with the care it deserved. Then the door opened, and a district representative walked in, a man in a gray suit with the district superintendent's office badge, who had driven from the central office in 22 minutes after Okafor's call, and who came in with a clipboard and the specific, brisk energy of someone who had been told what he would find and had arrived to confirm it. He looked at the incident reports on the desk. He looked at Okafor's folder. He looked at Garfield. "Principal Garfield," he said, "by order of the district superintendent, you are placed on administrative leave effective the close of business today, pending the outcome of a formal review of incident documentation and student welfare protocols at this facility." He set a single page on her desk. "This is the formal notification." Garfield looked at the page. She did not argue. She did not appeal. She had arrived at the specific, depleted stillness of a person who has been running a managed version of events for a very long time, and has just watched the management fail completely, and is now sitting in the unmanaged version, and does not have the resources to fight it. She picked up her coffee mug from the desk, set it down again, looked at the incident reports one more time. "I should have called her," she said. It was not addressed to anyone. "After the first one. I should have called Lily's mother after the first one." No one responded. The sentence did not require a response. It required witnesses, and the room provided them. The district representative turned to Carrie. "Ms. Carver, the district would like to formally apologize for the failures in communication and protocol that resulted in your daughter experiencing ongoing harm without appropriate intervention." He paused. "That apology is the beginning of a process, not the end of one. We would like to schedule a meeting with you and Mr. Okafor and Mr. Marsh to discuss what appropriate redress looks like going forward." Carrie looked at him for a moment. "Thursday," she said. "After 3 o'clock. I can make Thursday." He wrote it down. Lily had been watching the entire exchange with the quiet, comprehensive attention that she brought to everything. And at some point during the district representative's arrival, she had shifted from leaning against Angela to sitting fully upright on her own, with her back straight and her hands in her lap, and the dog tags visible at her collar, and the sauce still dry on her shirt. She looked like someone who had decided to receive the afternoon as something she had survived, rather than something that had happened to her. She looked at Declan. "Is this what you do?" she asked. "When you're not in the Navy?" "I'm still in the Navy," he said. "But is this what you do when you're not deployed?" He thought about the 30-day administrative hold, the donation box in the corridor, the 30 seconds to the exit. "Today it is," he said. She nodded, as if that was a satisfying answer. "Aries knew," she said. "Before you did." "He usually does," Declan said. She looked at the dog. Aries was sitting beside her chair with his chin resting on her knee, and his amber eyes watching the room in the patient, continuous sweep of an animal that was not going to stop working until the work was finished. "I'm going to tell my mom about him," Lily said. "When we get home. Everything." Carrie looked at her daughter. "You should have told me sooner." "I know," Lily said. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry," Carrie said. Her voice was rough and real. "Just tell me. Whatever it is, whatever happens, you tell me and we figure it out together. That's what we are. That's what we do." Lily reached out and took her mother's hand. Aries pressed his forehead against Lily's knee. Declan stood and moved to the window and looked at the parking lot where the day was doing what days did in the late afternoon, going gold and ordinary. Children being picked up, cars pulling out. The school going about the business of ending in the specific, unremarkable way that schools ended even on the days when something significant had happened inside them. His phone buzzed. Okafor. A text that read, "Marsh is ready to move. This is the case he's been building toward. Also, Gerald Holbrook called the superintendent's office 20 minutes ago and withdrew his re-election filing for the school board seat." Declan read it twice. He put the phone in his pocket and turned back to the room. There was a thing he had seen in every significant operation he had been part of. The moment when the objective was secured, but the work was not done. When the immediate crisis had resolved, and what remained was the longer, slower, less visible work of making sure the resolution held. That was usually the harder part. It was always the more important part. He looked at Lily. She was sitting with her mother's hand in hers, and her back straight, and the dog tags at her collar catching the afternoon light through the window. She was going to need people around her for the next year. Not just her mother, who was already carrying more than one person should carry. People who showed up and stayed. People who understood what the dog tags meant, and what the faded deployment shirt meant, and what the corner table in the cafeteria meant. The specific, accumulated weight of a child navigating loss in a building that had decided the management of her grief was an inconvenience. Declan had been 30 seconds from the exit. He thought about that one more time, and he set it down. He looked at Okafor. "What does she need for the next school year?" Declan said. "Not the review, not the legal case. Lily, what does she need that she is not currently getting?" Okafor looked at Lily. then at Carrie, then back at Declan, with the expression of a man who had been waiting for exactly that question to be asked by exactly the right person. "Sit down," Okafor said. Declan sat down. Aries stayed beside Lily. And in the principal's office of Maplewood Elementary, in the late afternoon of a day that had started as a 30-second errand and had become something considerably larger, the conversation shifted from what had gone wrong to what was going to go right, and did not stop until they had built the outline of something real enough to stand on. The conversation in that office ran until 5:47. By the time it ended, 3 things had been built that had not existed when Declan walked through the cafeteria door that morning. The first was a formal Gold Star Family Student Support Protocol that Okafor had been drafting for 8 months, and that the district representative had agreed to implement district-wide, pending the Thursday review. The second was a direct line between Carrie Carver and Marcia's legal team, who would be pursuing the educational equity case not just for Lily, but for every Gold Star family in the district whose children had been managed rather than supported. The third was a standing Saturday invitation from Okafor to Lily and Carrie for the Veterans Memorial Garden. Open-ended, no agenda, just ground and names, and the simple dignity of being in a place that understood what their loss meant. None of it was finished. None of it was supposed to be finished in one afternoon. The work that mattered rarely finished in one afternoon. Carrie gathered Lily's things and helped her into a clean school sweatshirt that Angela produced from the lost and found box, with the practical resourcefulness of a teacher who had been solving small logistical problems for years. The sauce-stained shirt went into a bag that Carrie folded carefully and put in her own bag, not in the trash. Declan noticed. He did not comment on it. Some things did not require comment. At the door, Lily stopped. She turned around and looked at Aries. He was sitting in the center of the office, watching her with the amber, unblinking attention that he had been giving her since the moment he pressed against her in the cafeteria. His tail moved once. She walked back to him and crouched down, and put both hands on his face the way she had done in the cafeteria, holding his head between her small palms, and looking at him with the full, unguarded attention that children give to animals, and that adults mostly forget how to offer. "Thank you," she said, not to Declan, to Aries. Aries pressed his nose to her forehead and held it there for 3 seconds. Carrie was watching from the door. Her hand was at her mouth, and she was doing the thing she had been doing all afternoon, holding herself together with the specific, practiced discipline of a woman who had learned that falling apart was a luxury she could not consistently afford. But her eyes were doing something her discipline could not manage. They were bright and full, and spilling over quietly at the edges, and she did not try to stop them. Lily stood up and took her mother's hand. They walked out. Declan stood at the office window and watched them cross the parking lot to Carrie's car. Lily walked with her back straight and the dog tags visible at the open collar of the borrowed sweatshirt. She did not look small. She looked like a child who had been carrying something heavy for 8 months and had spent the afternoon putting some of it down, not all of it. Some things do not come down in one afternoon, but enough that her posture was different, enough that the specific, protective stillness she had been using as armor in the cafeteria was not there anymore. She was just walking, straight and unhurried and present. Okafor appeared beside Declan. "Gerald Holbrook withdrew his board filing," Declan said. "I know," Okafor said. "He called me too." Declan looked at him. "He asked about the Memorial Garden program," Okafor said. "Whether Nash could participate, whether he could bring him." He paused. "I told him the same thing you told me. If he shows up, with his hands in the dirt, every Saturday." "And?" "He said yes," Okafor said. "He said he wanted to be there too." Declan absorbed that. He did not reach for a judgment about it. Some things required time before the judgment was fair, and the distance between a man who walked into an office to protect his son's impunity and a man who called a veterans liaison to ask about a cemetery service program was not a small distance. Whatever had moved in Gerald Holbrook in that office, in the moment he heard Lily describe what his son had done in the specific, unadorned language of a child who had processed it until it became information, was not nothing. Whether it held was a different question. Whether it held was a question for the Saturdays. Okafor's phone buzzed. He looked at it, and his expression changed in the specific way of someone receiving information that resolves a question they have been holding for a long time. "Marsh," he said, "the district superintendent has agreed to a formal curriculum review. Gold Star Family Student Support is going to be a mandatory component of the district's student welfare protocol by fall." He looked at Declan. He also cited the cafeteria footage in the review order. "The footage you shot through the corridor window." Declan said nothing. "You were 30 seconds from the exit," Okafor said. "Aries stopped." "I know." Okafor looked at the dog. "I know he did." Angela appeared in the doorway of the office. She looked at her brother with the expression she had been carrying since she walked into the room and found him already there. The expression of a younger sister encountering an older brother in the context of the thing he was actually built for, and registering the gap between knowing that about a person in theory and watching it happen in real life. "You have to go back to base at the end of the 30 days, she said. "Yes." "And then what?" Declan looked at the door that Lily and Carrie had walked out of. "Then Okafor is here," he said. "And you're here. And Marsh is working the case. And Lily has a garden plot in the memorial garden and a Saturday standing invitation and a mother who knows now not to carry it alone." He paused. "The 30 days don't have to do all the work. They just have to start it." Angela was quiet for a moment. "She's going to be okay," she said, not a question. "Yes," Declan said. The word came out without hesitation, with the specific, grounded certainty of someone who had spent an afternoon watching a child process the worst 8 months of her young life with more clarity and more integrity than most adults brought to their easiest days. "She is absolutely going to be okay." Angela nodded. She held it together for exactly 1 more second, and then she did what younger sisters do when they are in private with their older brothers after something real. She hugged him, arms around his chest and her face against his shoulder, and the specific, wordless communication of 2 people who had grown up together and understood that the most important things did not always need language. He put his arm around her and held her for a moment. Aries sat at their feet and watched the door. 3 weeks later, a Saturday morning in November, the Maplewood Veterans Memorial Garden was a half-acre behind the community center on Talbot Street, bordered on 2 sides by an iron fence and maintained by Okafor's organization through a combination of donated labor and a small municipal grant that had taken 4 years to secure. The plaques on the memorial wall ran alphabetically and covered 3 decades of service and 57 names, and the ground in front of them was kept clear and clean and planted with seasonal color by the hands of people who came every Saturday without being asked twice. Declan was kneeling in front of a planting bed near the east fence when he heard Lily's voice. She was talking to Nash. He had not known she would be there when Nash arrived. He had not known Nash would arrive with his father, who came in a regular car this time. No board member energy, no donor wall posture, wearing work clothes with the newness of clothes that had been purchased specifically for this purpose, because the man wearing them had not previously owned clothes for this kind of work. Nash had a wire brush and a bucket of cleaning solution, and he was working the plaque in front of him with the methodical, unhurried attention of a child who had been doing this for 3 Saturdays and had passed through the phase of performative effort into something quieter and more honest. He had stopped at a plaque in the S section. Lily had come around the path from her garden plot and stopped a few feet from it. They looked at each other in the specific loaded way of two children who had been the protagonist and antagonist of the same story, and were now standing in a different chapter of it with no script for what this was supposed to look like. Nash spoke first. "Is yours over there?" he asked. He nodded toward the plot where Lily had been working. "No," Lily said. "That's a flower plot. My dad's name is on the wall." Nash looked at the wall. "Where?" Lily walked to the C section and put her finger on the plaque. Nash followed her. He stood beside her and read the name. Staff Sergeant Owen Carver, the dates underneath it. Nash was quiet for a long moment. "How old were you?" he said. "7, Lily said. "I turned 8 3 months after." Nash looked at the plaque. His jaw worked slightly. "I'm sorry," he said. "For the cafeteria. And the other times." He paused. "I'm sorry for all of it." Lily looked at the plaque for a moment. She reached up and touched the dog tags at her collar. "My dad used to say that being sorry was the beginning," she said, "not the end." Nash looked at her. "Okay," he said. He said it the way he had said yes in the principal's office, with the smallness and the realness of a word that costs something to produce. "What's the rest?" Lily looked at the plaque one more time, and then at Nash. "Show up," she said. "That's what he always said. When you don't know what else to do, just keep showing up." Nash nodded slowly. He turned back to the wall and picked up his wire brush and began working the plaque in the C section. Careful and slow. The way you work something when you are not trying to finish quickly, but trying to do it right. Declan had stopped working in the planting bed. He was watching from across the garden with the still, grounded attention of a man who had learned from a dog how to observe without interrupting, how to read a situation accurately without inserting himself into the reading. Okafor came to stand beside him. "She handled that better than most adults would have," Okafor said quietly. "Owen would have," Declan said. "She got it from him." Okafor was quiet for a moment. "The district review came back," he said. "The pattern was systemic. 3 other Gold Star families in the district had underdocumented incident files. The new protocol covers all of them going forward." He paused. "Marsh is filing next month." Declan nodded. "Garfield?" "Resigned before the formal findings were issued," Okafor said. "She cited personal reasons." Declan looked at the memorial wall, at the 57 names and the dates under them, and the cleaned, maintained surface of each plaque that said someone had been here, and someone had taken care of it, because care was the minimum that those names deserved. His 30-day administrative hold ended in 4 days. He had not asked for an extension. He was not going to ask for an extension. He was going back because that was the work he had chosen, and the work he was built for, and the work that the country needed people built for it to keep doing. That was not a conflict with this afternoon. It was the same thing. The same reason Owen Carver put on a uniform in the first place. The same reason the names on this wall were on this wall. But he was coming back on his next leave. He had told Okafor. He had told Angela. He had told Carrie, briefly, at the end of the office conversation, in the specific, practical terms of someone scheduling a commitment rather than making a declaration. He would be back in 3 months. He wanted to know how Lily's garden plot was doing. He wanted to bring Aries, because Aries had unfinished business with a girl who had thanked him by name. Carrie had looked at him for a moment. "She talks about him every day," she had said. "She asks me if dogs remember people." "He remembers everyone he makes a call about," Declan had said. "He doesn't forget." Carrie had nodded. the nod of a woman filing that information somewhere. It was going to matter to her for a long time. Now Aries appeared from the path beside the east fence, having finished his own tour of the garden's perimeter, and came to sit beside Declan, with his shoulder against Declan's left leg, and his amber eyes moving out across the garden in the steady, unhurried sweep that was not vigilance anymore, but something quieter. Something closer to contentment, which was not a word Declan usually applied to a working dog, but which was the right word for what Aries looked like on Saturday mornings, in places that were doing the work they were supposed to do. Lily had moved back to her garden plot. Nash was still at the memorial wall, working the plaque slowly and carefully, with Gerald Holbrook standing 6 feet behind him, watching his son with the expression of a man who had walked into a principal's office to protect something, and had walked out, carrying something entirely different. Okafor said, "You know what Lily told me when she got here this morning?" "What?" "She said Aries stopped because he knew. Before you looked through the window. He already knew." Okafor paused. "She said that's what loyalty does. It knows before you have to ask it." Declan looked at the dog. Aries looked back at him with the amber eyes that had been reading the world accurately for 4 years, and had not once, in 4 years of fieldwork and Saturday mornings and 30-second moments in school corridors, given him a false read. He put his hand on the back of the dog's neck. Some people walked through the world looking for a reason to stop. Most people did not stop unless something made them. Aries had made him stop. On a Tuesday afternoon, with a donation box under one arm and 30 seconds to the exit, a dog had planted his feet and turned his body and made the sound that meant something requires your attention, and Declan had learned enough to listen. What followed from that stop was not finished. It was never going to be fully finished in the way that operations had, end states and objectives had, confirmation criteria. Lily was going to grow up and carry Owen's dog tags and navigate years that would be both easier and harder than the year she had just survived. And the system that had failed her was going to be better than it was, and not as good as it should be. And Nash Holbrook was going to become someone shaped partly by what happened in that cafeteria, and partly by what happened in this garden on these Saturday mornings. And Gerald Holbrook was going to spend a long time becoming someone worth being. And Carrie Carver was going to keep working 2 jobs and raising a daughter and building a life on ground that had been shaken to its foundation and was still standing because she was still standing. All of that was happening. All of that was going to keep happening long after Declan went back to base. It had started because a dog stopped walking, because loyalty does not calculate the cost before it stops. It does not check whether the exit is 30 seconds away, or whether the day has run long, or whether the situation is someone else's to solve. It stops when it sees what needs to be stopped for. It turns toward the thing. It makes the sound that says something requires your attention, and it stays there, pressed against the side of the person who needs it, until the work is done. Aries had always known that. He had known it the moment the air through the window crack told him what was happening inside that room. He had known it when he pressed against a small girl's arm in a cafeteria where nobody else was moving. He had known it when he put his chin on her knee in a principal's office and held his post for 3 hours without being relieved. He knew it now, sitting in a memorial garden on a November Saturday with his partner's hand on his neck, and a child 30 feet away, tending the ground above the roots of something that had been planted because he stopped. The work was never done, but it had been started, and a thing that has been properly started does not stop just because the person who started it has to leave. It grows.